of the DPRK comes amid an ongoing trade war between Beijing and Washington. So how does this traditional friendship between China and the DPRK affect the U.S.? Well, for more analysis on that, I'm joined now by Jonathan Broder. He's a Washington-based senior writer for Newsweek. Jonathan, I wanted to first ask you about the timing of all of this. After lots of invitations from Pyongyang, Xi Jinping is now going to visit the DPRK after talks with the U.S. stalled, ahead of an upcoming meeting on the sidelines of the G20 in Osaka at the end of this month with Donald Trump and Xi Jinping. What do you make of the timing?
Well, the most important factor there is the meeting that's upcoming between President Xi and Trump in Osaka at the G20 in Japan, a week after President Xi and Kim meet in North Korea. I think what President Xi is trying to show here is his influence on North Korea before he meets with President Trump. The speculation is that President Xi will try to urge Kim to come back to the talks, perhaps give Trump just enough so that Trump can say that he got enough of an incentive to return to the talks with Kim. In other words, I think that Xi's visit to North Korea is not for free. Kim needs recognition from a major power like China, and in order to get it, he's going to have to give something to Xi, which would translate into giving something to Trump, so that the denuclearization talks can get started again.
You said to get him back to the talks. So what sort of talks? We had in the past, the six-party talks were China had a very leading role in those. That's not how the talks are now happening. Could this present a new opportunity for a mediation role for Xi Jinping, or perhaps a return to the six-party talks as the format for proceeding forward?
I don't know about six-party talks. I think that the Trump administration prefers direct one-on-one talks. I think the role that China can play and is trying to play here by going to Xi going to meet with Kim is to convince Kim that the difference between the United States and North Korea over how the talks should proceed, that there should be a little bit more give and take on this. As you know, the Americans would like the North Koreans to denuclearize before the United States gives sanctions relief. North Koreans would like gradual sanctions relief in return for gradual denuclearization. I think that the Chinese are that President Xi is going to try to find some middle ground between there so that at least the talks can get started again in a direct fashion, not six-party talks.
You talked about nukes there, and this is, for Xi Jinping, his country, a neighbor of the DPRK. This surely must be weighing on his mind if there is an escalation, a nuclear war, any sort of military conflict. You could see a large refugee crisis across the border. How does that affect him when he visits the DPRK the first time in 14 years, I believe, a Chinese leader?
Yes.
How does that weigh on him?
Well, one of the ways that it weighs on him is that China has embraced the sanctions, the UN sanctions, something that has created tensions between North Korea and China. North Korea is not happy that China is taking part in the sanctions. China is going to insist that these sanctions stay in place until North Korea abides by UN regulations. So he's not giving up any sort of leverage on North Korea by going to visit with Kim. I think he wants to show that he's got influence and that he can essentially deliver Kim back to the negotiating table with Trump.
Jonathan Broder from Newsweek, thank you for your insight.